Hello and welcome to Lantern Lane Stories. Tonight's story is Owney, the little dog who circled the globe. The autumn of 1888 came early to Albany, New York. The Hudson River turned silver in the cold maple. Leaves the color of copper blew down the empty streets. One morning, a small dog appeared at the steps of the post office. He had wiry, tangled fur, brown and white and a little gray. His ears flopped forward, his tail curled over his back. His paws were muddy from the wet cobblestones. He pushed his nose through the heavy door inside. It smelled wonderful. Ink, paper, canvas. The sweet, dusty smell of 1,000 letters. He walked past the sorting table. He walked past the clerks with their rubber stamps and green ink. He walked past the tall shelves of packages tied with brown string, and then he found them. The mailbags. They were big, lumpy bags made of heavy canvas, stuffed with letters from Buffalo, Rochester, and faraway California. Letters with pressed flowers inside, letters with birthday drawings, letters with news from grandmothers and doctors and old friends. The little dog pressed his nose deep into the biggest bag. He sniffed for a long, slow moment. Then he turned around, once, twice, 3 times, and lay down. A postal clerk named Thomas looked up from his work. "Well," Thomas said, "who let a dog in here?" The dog opened one eye. His tail wagged once. Thomas crossed his arms. "And you look very comfortable," he said. The tail wagged again. Thomas set down his pen and found a scrap of bread. The dog took it gently, with great dignity. Another clerk named William leaned over from his stool. "He looks like an Owen to me," William said. "Don't you think?" Thomas looked at the dog, then at William, or maybe just Owney. Thomas said, "Since nobody seems to own him." The dog stood up, shook himself once, and sat down at Thomas's feet. He seemed to agree completely. From that day on, Owney lived at the Albany post office. He slept on the mailbags. He ate scraps from the clerks' lunches. He sat at the door each morning and watched the letters arrive. And when the bags moved to the wagon, Owney moved too. When the wagon moved to the station, Owney moved again. Everyone agreed. When Owney was nearby, nothing went wrong. The post office felt warmer somehow. Like something good was watching over it. One cold morning, Owney followed the mailbags all the way to the train platform. The locomotive breathed out great clouds of white steam. The platform smelled of coal smoke, leather, and the icy river. A railway mail clerk named George stepped in front of him. "Now hold on," George said. "Dogs don't ride mail trains." Owney sat down and looked up at him. His tail swept the platform in a slow, steady arc. George looked at the mailbags, then at Owney, then at the mailbags again. "Fine," he said at last. "But you stay on the bags." Owney jumped aboard before George finished the sentence. That first train carried him south to New York City, then west to Chicago, past flat fields of winter snow, then further Cleveland, Cincinnati, St. Louis, all the way to California. At every stop, the railway clerks had heard the stories. A dog who rode with the mail. "Is this him?" they asked. "The Albany dog?" Owney wagged his tail. Each clerk attached something to his collar, a small metal tag, a luggage ticket, a token. By 1890, the tags made a sound like wind chimes whenever Owney walked. Postmaster General John Wanamaker heard about the famous little dog. He laughed so hard his coffee went cold. Then he had his staff make something special. A custom leather harness just for Owney. Wide straps, lots of rings, and room for every single tag. A clerk in Albany buckled the harness around Owney and stepped back there. The clerk said, "Now you can carry them all." Owney trotted in a small, proud circle, listening to his tags jingle. He seemed very pleased. People began to say that Owney brought good luck. Twice, the train he was riding had a bad accident on the tracks. Both times, the mailbags arrived safely. Both times, Owney shook himself off and walked away without a scratch. The newspapers wrote about him every week. By 1893, Owney had ridden the trains across the whole country. He had slept on mailbags in cities from Seattle to Miami. He had more friends than any dog in America, but Owney was not finished. In the summer of 1895, Owney followed the mailbags to the waterfront. He was in Tacoma, Washington, a busy port city on the Pacific, and there at the dock sat a great ocean steamship. Her name was the Victoria. She smelled of salt and engine oil and fresh paint. Postal workers were loading bags of mail into her dark-hulled mail for Japan, for China, for Singapore, for the Suez Canal. Owney stood at the bottom of the gangway. He looked at the bags going up. He looked at the ship. He looked at the bags again. Then he walked straight up the gangway and sat down on the deck. A startled sailor blocked his path. "I don't think dogs are passengers," the sailor said. Owney did not move. The sailor went to find the captain. The captain looked at the small tag-covered dog sitting very calmly on his ship. "Well," the captain said, "if he has come this far, I suppose he means to come further." A telegraph message went out to Albany that very afternoon. It said, "Owney is going around the world." The Victoria sailed on August 19, 1895. The Pacific Ocean was enormous. Steel gray in the mornings, deep blue in the afternoons. At night, the stars were so thick they looked like spilled sugar. Owney sat at the front of the ship. The wind pushed his floppy ears back. The salt spray left little drops on his wiry fur. He looked perfectly content. On October 8th, the Victoria entered Yokohama Harbor in Japan. The water was green and still. Cherry trees on the hillside had turned red and gold. The smell of soy sauce and grilled fish drifted from the docks. Japanese postal officials came aboard in formal dark coats. They examined Owney's harness carefully, turning each tag over in their hands. One official looked up at the captain quite seriously. "This dog," he said, "has visited more post offices than most postal inspectors." He produced a beautiful postal tag from Japan. It was painted blue with red characters along the edge. He attached it to Owney's harness with a small, careful bow. Owney sat very still during the whole ceremony. When it was finished, he sneezed. The officials laughed. Then the Victoria sailed on past Shanghai Harbor, where wooden junks and steamships crowded the brown water. Past the Green Islands near Singapore, where the air smelled of pepper and spice. A new tag was added at every port. The harness grew heavier and heavier. Owney walked with his head tilted slightly to one side to balance the weight. He did not seem to mind. Then came the Suez Canal. It was a narrow waterway cutting through the driest desert Owney had ever seen. Tan and rose and pale gold on both sides. No trees, no grass, just sand and sky and warm, dry wind. Canal workers on the bank waved at the small dog at the ship's rail. He wagged his tail back at them. On December 23, 1895, the Victoria reached New York. Snow was dusting the pier. The smell of roasted chestnuts floated from a nearby street cart. Owney walked down the gangway. He had been away 132 days. He had circled the entire earth. The Albany clerks were there on the dock, waiting. One of them knelt down and began to count the tags on Owney's harness. Everyone was quiet. 1,017, the clerk said at last, very softly. The tags clinked together in the cold December breeze. Japan, said one clerk, touching a small blue tag. China, said another. Singapore, Suez, and home. Owney shook himself hard. All 1,017 tags rang out at once. It sounded like a celebration. The years after the great voyage were gentle ones. Owney still followed the mailbags. He still rode the trains, but his muzzle was turning white, and his steps were a little slower. The clerks gave him soft food. They lifted him onto the bags when his legs were tired, sometimes just to make him happy. They added one more tag to his harness. He always wagged his tail when they did. Owney passed away on June 11, 1897. The postal clerks of America were very sad. They wanted to remember him forever. So they gathered their own pennies and dimes, clerk by clerk, across the whole country. They had Owney carefully preserved. That way, everyone who came after could see exactly what he looked like. His wiry fur, his floppy ears, his leather harness covered in tags in 1911. They donated him to the Smithsonian Institution. Today, Owney stands in the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. He stands in a glass case in a quiet, warm room. He wears his leather harness. He wears all 1,017 tags. Some are round, some are square. Some have little pictures of trains or ships. They come from Albany, from Chicago, from Yokohama, from Shanghai. Each one is a place he went, a friend he made, a journey he took. If you visit Washington, D.C. someday, you can see him. You can stand close to the glass and look at his tags. You can find the little blue one from Japan with the red characters along the edge, and you can say to yourself, this scruffy little dog from New York went everywhere the mail went. He rode the trains across all of America. He sailed across the Pacific Ocean. He passed through the desert sands of the Suez Canal. And every place he visited left a small metal tag on his harness. 1,017 of them, each one a hello from somewhere far away. And so New York also slowly fell asleep. Good night.